It's Thursday, the 8th of August, and welcome to the Edinburgh Fringe. Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome once more to Scotland's capital city. That's Edinburgh. And for August only, it's the arts capital of the world. It also means for August only, I'm bringing you lots of interviews with people who are involved in the arts, be they on stage, on the streets, running the venues, helping out with ticketing, all of that and more on the Edinburgh Fringe show as we go through August. We're in daily, Monday through Friday, with a Saturday omnibus on your local community or student radio station. Check listings for details, and if it's not there, get them to get in touch with me, Ewan Spence, edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. Okay, so lots of things talking about the Fringe. Now, one of those was street performances, because the Fringe is not just the shows in the venues with the official stages. There is a bustling scene of street theatre, street performers, magic, acrobatics, a cappella choirs, all of that and more going on in Edinburgh. It's no longer the turn up and put on a show that was successfully organised by the street performers themselves in years gone by. There's now a process to apply to the Fringe Society to get a pitch allocated to you for a certain amount of time, and everybody has to turn up in the mornings and sort of draw it out of a hat and decide where and when their show will get to go on that day. Now, one of the good things about that rota is that you, as someone who's just visiting the city or live in the city and decided to go in for some street theatre, can go to the Ed Fringe website every morning to see who's performing, where and when. So if there's a regular performer you want to catch, such as friend of the parish Ian Kendall and his magic show, then you can sort out your day around that timetable. We'll put a link to the street events page of the Edinburgh Fringe website back on our website, so you can follow through for the link. But if you do Ed Fringe and search for how to plan street events in for your favourite search engine, then that will get you there as well. Joining me today in the podcast is Julie Flower with a story that looks at love, memories, and the stories our clothes have to tell in the show Grnadma's Shop. It brings the true life story of her grandma's counterculture second-hand shop in Sheffield to the Fringe. We talk about the trailblazing nature of her relative, investigating your own family tree for personal and professional reasons, and all about how subverting expectations makes life worth living. There might be a few cats involved as well. Joining me now on the Edinburgh Fringe show, we have Julie Flower. And, Julie, we started to do the preamble and get everything happy about the editing, and we ended up talking about the Sheffield music scene. So I've just pressed record.
Yay. Fantastic.
It's just like, I can only remember like bands from the 80s. The only one I could pick out from Sheffield was Def Leppard.
She's a great one. It's a great one, Ewan, but there's loads more.
See, I'm at a loss.
Thinking Human League.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, Pulp were just getting going.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, you've got people like Heaven 17.
Yeah. We're, all the young kids who are listening to this podcast now maybe recognise one of those names.
Yeah, exactly. But they can discover new things if they want to just Google them.
And discovery, finding new things, excavating lovely little ideas. What a lovely smooth lead into the show Grnadma's Shop that you're bringing up to Edinburgh there.
Absolutely, just like it was meant to be. So,
Grnadma's Shop, tell us about it.
Grandma's Shop is set in the second-hand clothes shop that my grandma ran in Sheffield city centre for over 30 years, from the early 60s to the mid-90s. And it's based all around my sort of childhood memories of her, but also the idea of me researching her in the present day and discovering people's memories of her, and just this idea of an ordinary lady, as it were, running a shop, but actually this extraordinary character and the impact that she had on people's lives.
You say an ordinary lady, but this shop started back in the 60s, and I don't think many women owned their own businesses in the middle of Sheffield in the 60s.
You're probably right, actually. And she was quite unusual because she was a legally separated, although not divorced woman. So she was quite unusual for her time anyway.
What's the difference there? What's the difference between divorced and legally separated?
Well, now you're asking, and I'm not sure it even exists anymore, but obviously divorces were, I suppose, considered more socially, what's the word, less acceptable at that time. And my grandparents had a legal separation. But as such, my grandma was a single woman, but then she had a gentleman she lived with, who was a comedian. So she was quite unusual for her time. And also, yeah, was supporting herself with her own business and also supporting around 30 stray cats as well.
Now it gets interesting. Not that it wasn't interesting before, but woman in the middle of Sheffield with 30 stray cats. Look, I know it's a cliche, but ooh.
Absolutely. She was the definitive cat lady, and she liked to cultivate an image of herself as the eccentric cat woman. And I suppose my research really, or what sparked my interest in doing this show, was that my brother reminded me of an article in The Guardian from 1989, which was all about my grandma as an eccentric shopkeeper who ran the shop at that time. I mean, in 1989, she was 71, so she was a pensioner, but she was running the shop essentially then to just feed all these stray cats that at that time were quite prevalent in the centre of Sheffield.
Was there any worry about going into your family's personal history, of finding things that you didn't want to find or disrupting the memories that you had?
I think it is always a concern or a consideration when you're doing anything like this. I kind of did have that. And I kind of, because I was also looking for people's memories, strangers who'd been in the shop, and sort of understanding their perspectives. And, you know, some of those were, well, they were, you know, very positive about how lovely she was, how welcoming, how they went in to buy interesting clothes and punk stuff. But, you know, one person actually made the point that, you know, although grandma tried her best, probably the cats didn't have the best lives, which is fair enough, you know. There's only so much you can do when there are so many stray cats. And also, you know, I wouldn't say I've discovered new things about her personal life and family life, but there are certain things that from a curatorial perspective, I have chosen not to include. I think that would be fair to say, because obviously it is personal. But also I was excited just around this idea of kind of immersing myself in her world again, and actually in Sheffield again, because you know what, I left Sheffield at 18 to go to university. And although I go back regularly to see my dad and to see some friends, you know, in a way, this is a sort of love letter to Sheffield and a rediscovery of Sheffield as well for me.
Do you have two grandmas now? And I mean that, do you have the grandma you remember and the grandma that you've researched?
I think they sort of meld together. There's almost maybe a public and private grandma. So through the course of my research, I discovered more newspaper articles that had been written about her, and including that she was involved in an international study of eccentricity, which is just something I never imagined. And then obviously I have my own memories of her, which I've, yes, explored and brought together. But they are very much different sides of the same person. And I think there was just something almost so, in a way, very authentic about my grandma. I know that's an overused word, but she was who she was, and she owned that space. And in many ways, she wasn't a conventional 1980s grandma, whatever that is, if that really exists. But yeah, she's just, I see all these different sides of her. And what I've learned from these articles, and also from, as I say, strangers who remember her in the shop, is I've just discovered different sides of her, but she's still very much the woman that I experienced as a child, helping her out in the shop every Saturday morning.
Did you find something else about yourself? Because I've asked her about, do you have two grandmas? Does that mean that, was there any point where you could see her point of view on something that happened when you were in the shop that you have a clear memory of?
Yeah, sort of the idea of gaining her perspective. There's a couple of things. So I think in terms of discovery about her, I've been struck in doing this at how progressive and ahead of her time she was in terms of her openness to all the different sorts of people who came into the shop, in different emotional states at different points in their lives, and how she was non-judgmental on a personal level and had that space for them. So I would say almost in going through this process, I've kind of come to respect that more about her, and also reflected on that for myself. Am I like that? And how could I be more like that? So that's been really interesting. And I think actually in rediscovering my childhood memories and in playing my childhood self in this, I have kind of reconnected with those dreams and hopes and perspectives that I had as a child, and actually realized there's sort of these common threads that run through to today. And maybe, things that I imagine are things that I've developed in adulthood are actually things that were there as a child and were strongly influenced by her.
How do you take all of that, put it into a show, but know that the show is not for you, it's for other people?
I think it's about universal themes. So it's been very interesting talking to people after the previews around what they've been finding in the show. So they've been reflecting on their own relationships with their own grandparents, which can often be quite a different relationship to one that maybe you have with your parents. They've been reflecting on people who they have lost, and kind of thinking about their own childhood memory. And it's also brought back a sort of real nostalgic sense for many people who say, remember the 80s, just even things like vintage carrier bags and stuff like that, just that immersion in a shop of that time. So I think it's those sorts of things that help to make it very relatable. And also I've tried to bring in a certain very theatrical quality. So I've set it in two main time periods. So it's me in a fictional family history group researching Grandma. And, you've got all those interesting dynamics of a group of people in a community drawn together who are very different, but who've all got these family history interest, and then going back into the past. And I'm someone who really enjoys doing multi-character work. So I've got different characters. I'm playing a number of different characters, including customers who come into the shop. So I'm hoping that there's enough of that theatricality and element of drama and story and discovery that it holds together as a piece that's interesting in and of itself.
And it's also pushing your boundaries as well. You've done the Fringe before, but mostly on an improv side of things rather than what we have here, which is scripted.
Yes, indeed. And although I've also performed at the Fringe with a new writing group, Orange Works, that's always been as an ensemble, and it's never been my own writing. So I thought I'd just go for the whole hog you in this time. I thought I want to write a piece myself, and I'm going to do it as a solo show. So yeah, I'm doing it. And actually, I've loved the process. Creatively, I've loved it. And I've been working alongside a wonderful dramaturg stroke director, Sarah Chu, who's really put me through my paces. And I think what would have originally been maybe a much more conventional storytelling, which almost sounded like a novel. My first draft sounded a bit like a Dickens novel. But now, version 18, it's much more, it's taking advantage of those different character perspectives, the time hops, the high moments of comedy, but also the real pathos and reflective moments as well.
Do you have 30 cats on stage?
Sorry to disappoint.
Oh.
What? No cats were harmed in the making of this production. They're all out the back and we never quite see them.
And they're probably doing a show on the Royal Mile.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for the incredibly cliched question. Sometimes in podcasts you want to avoid the obvious ones, and sometimes I think this is going to be really interesting. What if your grandma could see this show?
I think, first of all, she'd be a bit like, blooming heck, what? What? Why am I a subject for this? That's ridiculous. It's all those posh people going to watch theatre. Then I think her second thought would be just that she would revel in the attention, because certainly the grandma that I knew had a real performative quality. She loved to hold court in the shop. And when you read these newspaper articles about how she essentially created her own narratives, I hope she'd find it funny and thought-provoking, and I think she'd enjoy the attention, if I'm really honest. I think she'd love to chat with everybody afterwards and say, oh yeah, that's all about me.
What's going to happen to your grandma tomorrow then? Tomorrow as in after the show, after the Fringe?
Well, I'd like to take her to a few smaller festivals and also to Sheffield, the kind of homecoming show. So that's my intention, to do that. In an ideal world, I think that Grandma would like a lovely kind of little series, all the different transformations of the different customers coming into her shop. This idea that every piece of secondhand clothing tells a story and has different stories attached to it is also, and this is maybe more of a podcasting thing, but it's around this idea of celebrating ordinary yet extraordinary people. And there are people like Grandma in communities day in, day out, doing their jobs, just holding those spaces and having those little really important moments of humanity and connection with ordinary people. And they're actually doing something very extraordinary, but they're not paid as public servants or, doing those sorts of roles. And I just think this idea of celebrating and learning about their stories, because there's a wider thing here about whose stories do we tell and why and how. And I love the idea of this very proudly working class shopkeeper from Sheffield being an example of that kind of person, but there are hundreds of thousands of examples of them all over.
Much like the Fringe, where it's not hundreds and thousands of shows, but it does feel like that sometimes. Where can we go and visit Grandma's shop during August?
So you can come and visit Grandma's shop at the Gilder Balloon, Patterhouse, and it is in the Snug.
And that is running right through until 26th of August. We will have links into the ticket office from our website, which is edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com. I'm guessing, Julie, you're all websited, modern social media, web internets up to as well?
I am. So the website is grandmas-shop.co.uk, and Instagram is at grandmas_shop_play.
We will get links to those back in our website as well.
I can't remember
they're all there. We'll get them back in our website
kid.
with the ticket office link and all of that going on there as well. Julie, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for introducing me to your family and to the shop. And I'm still disappointed we're not going to have all those cats on stage. So I will be out the back.
Fantastic. You're feeding them all.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, no. They might follow me home, and then where would your props be after that?
Exactly.
Julie, thanks for your time.
Been a real pleasure, Ewan. Thank you.
Julie Flower there with her show Grandma's Shop. Plays Gilder Balloon at the Patterhouse, 12:20 p.m. every day and runs through until August the 26th. There's always ticket links at our website and links out to the Edinburgh Fringe Society street events page and through Julie's website as well. As for tomorrow, well, it's Friday. I'm not quite sure what's going to go on. I have a few ideas. I'm thinking jazz. Check in tomorrow, come back to the podcast, have a listen. We'll find out if that's true or not. As always, the usual link, like, love, share, subscribe. If you can manage it, that would be great. If you've got time to leave us a star rating or a review in your favourite podcast app, content directory, whatever, that would be much appreciated as well. It helps other people find the show. But for now, I'm heading back into the city, and I'll catch you maybe at the Fringe, maybe beyond. Ta-ra for now. You've been listening to the Edinburgh Fringe Show, hosted by Ewan Spence, produced by Spence Media and Radio 6 International. Listen to more at edinburghfringe.thepodcastcorner.com.